Hi, I'm Diego Luque, Campaign Specialist with the Department of Homeland Security Blue Campaign. Thank you for attending this virtual training on human trafficking awareness and prevention for casino and hospitality staff. Today, you're going to be hearing from subject matter experts from Homeland Security Investigations, the Blue Campaign, and the National Indian Gaming Commission. In today's training, we're going to focus on a couple of different points. Firstly, I'm going to be going over a little bit about what the Blue Campaign is doing to prevent human trafficking. We're also going to go over some of those resources that we have publicly available for the general public, casinos, and different industries. Then we're going to be going over what is human trafficking, who are the victims, who are the traffickers, and we're also going to be going over some myths and misconceptions. Lastly, Blue Campaign is going to finish off by going over our general public indicators video. This is going to be a video dedicated to showing you what are some possible indicators that are visible in human trafficking situations within a hospitality sort of setting. Then I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues at the National Indian Gaming Commission. They are going to be going over more specific indicators that are being seen in casinos and different hospitality industries. We're going to go over how to respond to human trafficking activities. And lastly, we're going to kick it back to my colleague, Christopher Wallace, to talk about money laundering and human trafficking. We have a pretty robust schedule here, and we're really looking forward to going over it all with you. All right, first, it's important to go over who we are here at the Blue Campaign. The Blue Campaign is a public awareness campaign aimed at providing awareness trainings and materials to industries, law enforcement, and the general public in order to effectively combat human trafficking in all of its forms. We partner with law enforcement, with industries, and community partners, including tribes and tribal gaming regulators, to recognize and respond to indicators of trafficking and how to appropriately respond to possible cases. We are not law enforcement. We are a program of public awareness and targeted trainings. Each campaign activity aligns to long-term protection and prevention outcomes. Everyone can play a role here. You can help play a role in ending human trafficking by learning key indicators of the crime, raising awareness of human trafficking with your community or industry, and reporting suspected trafficking incidents. A lot of the different resources that we have available here at the Blue Campaign are dedicated to law enforcement, convenience retail industry professionals, transportation industry, hospitality, adults that are working with youth, student leaders on college campuses, faith-based, and of course, tribal gaming and hospitality. We have a variety of different awareness materials, and really our major focus since our founding has been the development of vital public awareness materials for the public and specific industries. We work with an entire network of survivor consultants for every product we release to ensure accuracy and incorporate their feedback into these materials. Blue Campaign is offering posters, toolkits, infographics, indicator cards, shoe cards, pamphlets, and everything is free. Organizations can order in bulk. Entire casinos can order materials in bulk. And you can download most of these materials directly from our website. Many of these materials are also available in multiple languages. I think the last time that we checked, we have over 41 languages and growing. Which brings me to this toolkit. This is the Tribal Gaming and Hospitality Employees Toolkit. You all are in a unique position to help stop human trafficking. The resources and tips in this toolkit will help spread awareness and keep you all on the lookout for potential human trafficking indicators. This is also available on our website, free for download, and also if you contact me directly, I could get some copies to your casino. All right. Now, I really want to get into the bread and butter of what this presentation is, and it is human trafficking awareness training. We cannot prevent something that we don't understand. So in this part of the presentation, I'm going to be going over what is human trafficking. As a professional in the tribal gaming and hospitality industry, you are in a unique position to recognize and report potential human trafficking activities. You play an important role because you are regularly interacting with guests and the greater public. You may be able to recognize signs that a guest is in danger. So, what is human trafficking? Human trafficking can be defined as the use of force, fraud, or coercion to either obtain labor or some sort of commercial sex act. So these three elements, force, fraud, and coercion, are very important because at least one of them has to be present for it to be considered human trafficking. The only caveat there is, under federal law, if the person engaged in a commercial sex act is under the age of 18 years old, they are automatically considered a victim of human trafficking. There is no such thing as an under 18-year-old prostitute. They are automatically considered victims of human trafficking. Force, fraud, coercion are not needed. So I do want to go over what are some examples of these force, fraud, coercion. Force can be violence, abuse, confinement. We refer to these types of individuals as guerrilla traffickers, somebody that uses violence to get what they want from their victim rather than there being some sort of exchange of goods. One common misconception is that trafficking victims are not paid. Trafficking victims can be getting paid very little money. They can be getting paid in some sort of other luxury items. They can be getting paid via housing, offering a victim a house where a bed where they are sleeping at. A lot of times under force, we see that a victim is forced to commit these commercial sex acts, and if they don't, they are going to get abused. Now under fraud, we are seeing two types of examples of fraud out in the field. Number one is false promises of love. We refer to these types of individuals as Romeo traffickers. Somebody that makes their victim fall in love with them. Somebody that gets on their good side, that tells them all the nice things that they want to hear. But the end goal is exploitation. This is how they gain the trust of their victim, pretending that they're in love with them. And then once that trust has been built, the exploitation starts. Another example of fraud that we are seeing is false promises of a well-paying job. Usually, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. We see a lot of these false promises online via Snapchat, via Instagram, via all social media profiles pretty much. A person will receive some sort of message. For example, they'll receive a message like, you have nice looks, you have, a pretty face. How about you work for us for a modeling agency? Or how about you, start an influencers page? So usually if it sounds too good, like you have never done some sort of modeling or have a headshot even, but this person is offering you wazoo amounts of money and telling you that you have what it takes to, make millions in the industry. What industry? That person is just selling you dreams. So number two is those false promises of well-paying jobs under fraud. Now, coercion. Coercion is going to be one of the main elements that we see in human trafficking cases. And there are a lot of different examples of what coercion really is and how a trafficker will try to coerce their victim. Some of the high-level coercion examples that we have seen are taking advantage of a victim's chemical or drug dependency. So taking advantage of an addiction. They know that that victim is going to want drugs. They know that that victim's going to want, their next hit, their next fix. So they're going to do what the trafficker tells them to do so they could get that next high. We also see that deportation and arrest is a form of coercion. So threatening somebody that they're going to get deported or arrested if they don't work or if they don't commit those sex acts, that is coercion. Also, blackmail. Blackmail is also a form of coercion that we are seeing, threatening, the victim with even a picture, threatening them with leaking their images online, threatening them with, this is a picture of your kid's school, and using that in order to coerce their victim to get them to do what they want. So these three elements are very important. And now that we're really speaking about human trafficking, it's also important to note that under human trafficking, We see sex trafficking, labor trafficking, or also called forced labor, and we also see domestic servitude. So this is stay-at-home nannies, this is housekeepers. So those three forms of trafficking are all human trafficking. And who is this affecting? Who is this crime really affecting? And really, there is not a single profile for a victim of human trafficking. They could be any age, race, gender, socioeconomic background, citizenship status. There is no single profile for a victim of human trafficking. But one thing that there is in common is vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities such as being economically unstable, being under one of those sort of addictions, having alcohol, substance abuse, immigration status. And my colleague Christopher is going to be going over some additional vulnerabilities coming up. And just as a victim could be anybody, so can a trafficker. There is not a single profile for a trafficker. It could be male or female. Yes, we have female traffickers. There is not a single face. We have seen parents being the trafficker. So they are trafficking their own kids, something called familial trafficking. We have seen employers trafficking their employees in some sort of labor trafficking. We have seen a boyfriend, a husband, a girlfriend, and a wife trafficking an individual. So really, not a single profile for a trafficker. But one thing that we have to note with traffickers is that a lot of times victims know who their trafficker is. Whether it was a complete stranger that came up to them on the street one day and told them they have, all the potential and they want to include them in a job, or whether it's somebody that they love, a parent, a grandparent. We have seen traffickers come in all types and different forms. And where are they trying to reach their victims? Usually I like to kind of say two different forms. So we can look at pre-COVID times. They are at all the popular meeting areas. So whether it's casinos, clubs, bars, we've seen traffickers outside of movie theaters. We've seen traffickers in malls and shopping centers trying to recruit their next victim. And we have also seen traffickers meet victims when they are at their most vulnerable, outside of prisons, outside of juvenile detention centers, outside of rehabs and halfway homes. Areas where they know that victim is vulnerable, they try to strike there. Now, we could also look at a post-COVID sort of world where everybody was confined to their homes and everybody was online. Parents would give iPads to their kids and a lot of education went online. We have also seen that traffickers are very involved in the digital world, whether it's the social media profiles such as Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, whether it's gaming applications such as Fortnite or Roblox. We have reported cases on those gaming centers. So it's very important, if there's any parents out here, if you have cousins, nephews, anybody that's interacting with young people, it's important to let them know that there are dangers online, because it is definitely somewhere where we've seen traffickers are trying to reach those younger audiences, especially in that digital world. I want to go over now some myths and misconceptions that we hear about this crime. So a big part of this campaign is also to kind of go over what are those myths and misconceptions that we're hearing. And number one myth is these two. People conflate these terms all the time, but these are two distinct crimes. Yes, they're both illegal, but they're very different. So smuggling. Human smuggling is a crime against the border, transportation-based, and it requires a border crossing. So this is essentially committing a crime against the border. It is voluntary. And we say it's voluntary because people that are getting smuggled in are paying up to $20,000. Their life savings to get smuggled into the country. In the southwest border, we refer to these types of individuals as coyotes. People are paying coyotes their life savings to get smuggled into the country. They understand that what they are doing is illegal, but for one reason or another, they want to be able to get smuggled into the country. So, smuggling, crime against the border, based on transportation, and it requires that border crossing. Now, trafficking. Trafficking is a crime against a person, exploitation based. So a trafficker is using one of those elements that we spoke about, force, fraud, or coercion, to get what they want from their victim. There is no border crossing required with human trafficking. There is no city line crossing necessary. There is no county line, no state line. This could be happening right in our neighborhoods. Remember when I brought up the term familial trafficking? So this is a parent or a grandparent trafficking a little one. That little one had no say of where they grew up in. They are getting trafficked right in that childhood home, right in their city. So with human trafficking, there is no border crossing required. There is no sort of crossings required. And of course, it's involuntary. Nobody is signing up to get trafficked. They are under one of those elements of force, fraud, and coercion. And whether they consider themselves a victim of human trafficking or not, they are. So those three elements that I mentioned, that force, fraud, and coercion, especially under coercion and fraud, that victim might not consider themselves a victim of human trafficking. They might consider themselves an employee and there's no crime happening. They might consider themselves a girlfriend or a wife or a boyfriend. And in their head, their partner could never be trafficking them. So we do run into that a victim might not consider themselves a victim, but it's still considered involuntary. They are just there under that force, fraud, or coercion. In this kind of human trafficking sphere, there are a variety of misconceptions and really conspiracies about what this crime is. So I want to go over some high level and really just some of the more popular myths that we hear out there. Number one, victims will attempt to seek help in public. Why doesn't a victim reach out to an attendant at your casino? Why don't they go directly to law enforcement? There could be a variety of different reasons. Number one, a victim might be afraid to seek help because of threats from their trafficker. They've probably been threatened that they're going to get beat, that they might get killed. There might also be threats against their family or people that are close to them. And in order to protect those loved ones, they continue to do what that trafficker wants. There's also in the victim community a mistrust of law enforcement. They think that they might not get believed when they do go up to law enforcement. They think they might get arrested. Maybe in the victim's mind, they think that what they have been doing themselves is illegal. And they might not consider themselves a victim of human trafficking. So a variety of reasons why they might not want to seek help directly to somebody. Number two myth, victims are only foreign-born individuals. We've kind of gone over this. There is not a single profile for a victim of human trafficking. They could be any age, race, nationality. And human trafficking is also happening to United States citizens in all 50 states. So, no single profile for a victim. This third myth, victims are usually physically restrained, held in bondage, or otherwise physically abused. This is what I call the Hollywood myth. So has everybody seen the movie Taken? There might be a couple people that have. With Liam Neeson, he might be Father of the Year for his role, but in reality, that is a very dramatized situation of what human trafficking really looks like. Yes, physical force can be present in a human trafficking situation, but cases most often involve psychological and emotional forms of abuse. Those kind of injuries that a person can't see with their eyes, but that are present inside. Human trafficking, that victimization, it's a lot of psychological and emotional abuse that goes along with it, more than physical force. All right, so while we're on that kind of debunking myths train, we're going to go over some popular labor trafficking myths that we also hear. Number one myth, that labor trafficking victims in the United States are non-citizens that are here illegally. The reality is that majority of victims that are involved in labor trafficking are illegally here in the US on those H-2A or H-2B work visas. Another myth, that labor trafficking is only happening in illegal or underground industries. Labor trafficking cases have been reported and prosecuted in a number of legitimate industries, whether it's mom and pop restaurants, whether it's agricultural fields, construction sites. Very recently, I heard of a case happening in a cleaning service. So a variety of different businesses that are even registered with the Department of Labor have used some form of labor trafficking. And number three, if a victim consented to be in their initial smuggling situation, then it cannot be labor trafficking. So this is very important, and this goes kind of back to what we were talking about, human smuggling and human trafficking. If a person has gotten smuggled into the country, but then is forced to work or is forced into commercial sex acts, then yes, what was once human smuggling has now turned into a human trafficking case. As soon as that smuggler told them to do some sort of work that wasn't agreed upon, once they have involved that force, fraud, or coercion into that situation, that human smuggling has now turned into human trafficking. It doesn't matter if that person initially consented to being smuggled. Once you introduce that force, fraud, and coercion into that smuggling situation, it now turns into human trafficking. All right, so now that you all are experts on what is human trafficking right now, we have gone over those elements of force, fraud, coercion. We have gone over those kind of common misconceptions that we hear about the crime. Now we are going to move on to the sort of indicators portion of this training. And we like to get started by showing you all a video called our General Public Indicators video. So this is a training that is available on our website, but we have tailored it to this specific training on possible indicators that a person might see within a hospitality setting.
Hi, may I help you?
We're checking in.
Is there an adult or a parent with you?
No, our dad dropped us off to check in. He'll be back soon.
Oh, okay. What's the last name?
Williamson.
Charles Williamson? I see it here. He has you checking in for him. I see 2 rooms for 2 nights. Is that correct?
If that's what he said.
May I have an ID, please? And I'm also going to need a credit card for any incidental expenses.
He gave me his card for that.
Here are your room keys. The rooms are connected as your dad requested. The elevator is just behind you to your right. There is a complimentary breakfast served every morning right down here from 7 to 10 a.m. There's also a free happy hour every evening from 5 to 7 p.m. That includes snacks. Now, the pool is located down the hall and to your left, and the gym is across from the pool.
Okay, thanks. Come on, let's go. Daddy says we need to get the pictures done now. Let's go. Hi, Daddy. Yes, I'm taking the pictures now. I know, I'm sorry. I know I was supposed to do the pictures last night, but I had 3 dates and I was so tired I fell asleep. I have the money for you. Yes, she's in her bikini. I'm doing her pictures next. These will look like you want. What you told me to do. I'll text them to you as soon as I'm done. Okay. When am I gonna see you? You keep sending us all these different places, but I never get to see you. I miss you. I know I'm helping us, but I'm tired, and I want to see you. I know. We're good. I got this. I got us. Yes, I know. I love you too.
A steady flow of different men into and out of the same hotel room or rooms can be an indicator of human trafficking. It's important to note that the buyers who purchase sex don't come from any particular social class or profession, age group. Instead, they are ordinary, everyday people. White collar and blue collar. Young and old. Another indicator you may see in a hotel is frequent housekeeping visits to the same room or rooms, delivering towels, shampoos, and soap.
Housekeeping.
This is because victims will shower between buyers, and buyers will often shower before leaving a room.
All right, so in this video, you just observed a human trafficking situation in a variety of different settings, whether it's checking in at the hotel, whether it's at the food line getting breakfast, or at the pool. There are a lot of different indicators that have been observed in this video. Some of the more common ones I saw were that trafficker or the recruiter was thinking that this trafficker is her Romeo, is her boyfriend. So we saw that, we observed how they were talking to each other. We also saw that one person was doing all the speaking for the group. And yes, those victims looked like minors in that video. So a variety of different indicators were observed there. And at this time, I really want to hear what you all saw. Think about, reflect about what were the things that really stood out in that video. When we're also talking about indicators, it's very important to understand that no single indicator is proof that human trafficking is occurring. Context and indicators go hand in hand. Those indicators that you have seen in this video are not an exhaustive list by any means. A lot of the indicators that we're going to go over are not an exhaustive list. They are high-level indicators that are being seen in human trafficking cases. But once you start grouping indicators with the appropriate context and seeing various indicators, or maybe just one that is really standing out that you're like, this just doesn't feel right, then that could be a time to ask more questions, to try to respond to a potential case of human trafficking. But keep in mind, the context and indicators go hand in hand. And now, I want to pass it to my colleagues at the National Indian Gaming Commission to talk about more of their role in human trafficking prevention and also bring up more indicators that they are seeing of this crime. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mary Parker. I am a member of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, and I serve as the Public Affairs Manager for the National Indian Gaming Commission. Human trafficking is a global epidemic. It is also one of the most severe forms of violence. While victims may be of any gender, age, race, or socioeconomic background, traffickers target the most vulnerable members of society. The United States Trafficking in Persons Report identifies American Indians and Alaska Natives as particularly vulnerable. Native women still experience more physical and sexual violence than any other racial and ethnic groups. The effects of historical trauma are deeply felt in Native communities, families, and individuals. These and other factors, such as the complexity of jurisdictional law enforcement issues in Indian country, contribute to the disproportionate impact of human trafficking on Native people. All communities and all industries are susceptible to human trafficking activities. The tribal gaming industry has and continues to play a key role in the protection of tribal people, their communities, their workforce, and patrons. Many tribes have invested their gaming revenues in programs vital to supporting a safe and healthy community and gaming environment. The work of tribal gaming regulators and operations is making a positive difference in combating human trafficking, and our agencies stand ready to work with you to help stop human trafficking. So let's talk about NIGC authorities and human trafficking. What authority does NIGC have in regard to human trafficking? The Indian Gaming Regulatory Act and NIGC regulations require tribes to operate gaming facilities in a manner that adequately protect public health and safety. In addition, tribes must include this mandate in their gaming ordinances. NIGC Bulletin 2021-2 provides detailed information outlining NIGC's authorities and referral mandate as specified by IGRA. What may NIGC do in regard to gaming operations, key employees, and primary management officials involved in human trafficking? NIGC's response depends upon the circumstances of each situation. If a situation creates imminent jeopardy, a real and immediate threat to human health and well-being, which if uncorrected could result in a serious illness or death, the NIGC chair may immediately issue a notice of violation and a temporary closure order of a gaming operation. Such enforcement action may be issued to a tribe, a tribal gaming operator, management contractor, or an unapproved management contractor for involvement in a public health and safety situation, or the failure to address it. As outlined by NIGC Bulletin 2021-2, enforcement actions also may result in a fine. Importantly, IGRA requires the NIGC to refer violations of other laws to the appropriate law enforcement officials. Because human trafficking is a crime, NIGC will expeditiously refer the matter to the appropriate tribal, federal, and if applicable, state law enforcement agencies for criminal investigation. Such referrals include tribal and Bureau of Indian Affairs law enforcement entities and tribal gaming regulatory authorities. Tribal gaming commissions are empowered to investigate and take enforcement actions against tribal gaming operators and management contractors if they are involved in a public health and safety situation, including human trafficking. If a gaming operation's primary management officials or key employees are involved in human trafficking activities, NIGC will notify the tribe that it must suspend these employees' gaming licenses, and if these individuals seek employment at other tribes' gaming operations, NIGC will object to the issuance of their gaming licenses. In sum, an individual's involvement in human trafficking serves as an immediate and future grounds for revoking and denying their gaming license. NIGC wants to do all we can to ensure that bad actors don't go from one tribal gaming operation to another to carry out criminal activities. How does NIGC monitor public health and safety at gaming operations? IGRA and NIGC regulations allow NIGC to request public health and safety information at any time given IGRA's Environment, Public Health, and Safety mandate. This specifically when reviewing gaming ordinances for approval and as a part of facility license submissions for new or reopening gaming facilities. NIGC compliance officers conduct regular site visits to gaming operations, which involve compliance reviews and accessing complaints and reports. In the course of their gaming compliance work, compliance officers may also hear about human trafficking violations from tribal gaming commissioners, employees, patrons, and witnesses. Although tribes are not required to notify NIGC if there has been a human trafficking incident, we encourage tribes to share such information so that the NIGC is aware of trends and best practices for remedying human trafficking situations. How does NIGC coordinate addressing human trafficking violations with other federal, state, and tribal law enforcement agencies? IGRA directs NIGC to refer violations of federal, state, and tribal law to the appropriate law enforcement officials. So if evidence exists of human trafficking violations, NIGC will refer the matter to the FBI and the Department of Justice, given the federal human trafficking laws that may be implicated to state law enforcement if the potential violation occurs in a state having criminal jurisdiction over Indian lands or reservation, and to tribal law enforcement if tribal laws are implicated. Next, we will share information on NIGC human trafficking activities and resources. Collaboration with tribes, tribal gaming operations, federal partners, and non-government organizations. In 2019, the NIGC worked with Truckers Against Trafficking and DHS Blue Campaign to provide awareness on the topic of human trafficking. In 2021, the NIGC issued a bulletin on human trafficking, reiterating our commitment to continuing efforts to be a part of the solution to end human trafficking. As a part of this commitment, we created a human trafficking resource page on our website, nigc.gov. You can find a copy of the bulletin here along with several resources. The Human Trafficking Resource Pamphlet was updated March of 2024. It is a comprehensive pamphlet with excellent resources specific to Indian country, training for tribal gaming, victim services resources, tribal youth resources, and resources for our missing and murdered Indigenous persons. This is a free resource available to the public. Please utilize it and share with others. The NIGC has also hosted virtual special emphasis conversations on missing and murdered Indigenous persons, where we have highlighted NIGC and sister agency resources and featured tribes who are using gaming revenues to support MMIP efforts. Tribes such as the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians and the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma. Please take advantage of these valuable resources and watch them, share them with others, and use them for team trainings. In 2021, the National Action Plan to Combating Human Trafficking was issued by the White House. This report states that in coordination with existing efforts led by the National Indian Gaming Commission in conjunction with the Department of the Interior's Bureau of Indian Affairs, Treasury, with support of the Department of Homeland Security, the agencies will conduct outreach to tribal hospitality enterprises to raise awareness on the risks of human trafficking in the industry. In addition to the online toolkit for human trafficking in the tribal gaming and hospitality industries, the NIGC, DHS, and BIA developed this training you are receiving today. As a professional in the tribal gaming and/or hospitality industries, you are in a unique position to recognize and report potential human trafficking activities. You play an important role because you regularly interact with guests and the greater public in general. Now we will discuss indicators of human trafficking that may be observed by security, surveillance, and transportation staff. Some of these indicators may also be observed in other professions across the gaming industry. Does the guest appear distressed, disoriented, or have visible injuries? Many sex trafficking victims are forced to provide sex and sex acts for up to 12 to 14 hours a day, with little sleep and little food, while often enduring physical, sexual, and psychological trauma from the trafficker and from the buyers of sex. Seem unforthcoming about their full names, home address, or vehicle information when asked. The victims know they are not to engage in conversation with anyone. If they are asked questions, they are going to share as little information as possible as to not get in trouble from their trafficker. Appear with a younger person that he or she did not come in with originally. This would be the buyer of sex. And if you notice this patron going to and from the casino to the hotel or parking lot with a younger person or persons they did not come in with, this could be a human trafficking situation. The best indicator that we all have is our gut instinct. If something just seems off or doesn't feel right, listen to your gut instinct. And if you are in surveillance, continue to monitor their activity. Surveillance has a unique opportunity to have eyes on suspicious activities without alerting anyone or putting anyone in danger. Demonstrate aggressive, intimidating, or threatening behavior toward a person in areas away from general public view. The trafficker and/or the buyer of sex may treat the victim differently when away from the public view as to not draw attention. Does the guest sell items to beg from other patrons or staff? The victim may not have met the monetary quota required by the trafficker and is trying to find any way to meet that quota through selling items or begging for money. They may enter through the side or rear entrances instead of the lobby or attempt to prop exit doors open. The trafficker and buyers want to be out of sight and out of mind, which is why human trafficking is often called the ghost crime that happens in plain sight. Again, where security, surveillance, and transportation may have an opportunity to observe these indicators that most people wouldn't. Does the guest demonstrate suspicious behavior in private vehicles, RVs, or cab-over commercial trucks? Not all casinos have a hotel. You will want to watch for people going to and from the casinos to the parking lot with people they didn't originally come in with. They may park their vehicles or get dropped off in the parking lot so the license plate is not visible. Again, the traffickers or the buyers of sex may try to hide in plain sight by making it more difficult to identify their vehicles. And now indicators of human trafficking that casino gaming attendants may observe. Does the guest give excessive tips as a mean to bribe for silence? Casinos are consumer and customer service driven businesses, and tips are not uncommon. However, if you see suspicious activities and the person gives you a tip that does not seem appropriate, and again, using your gut instinct, report that to surveillance and let them have eyes on the person or persons. Solicit other patrons with phrases such as, "Winning big tonight," "Want to go smoke a cigarette?" "Let's go back to my room and party." The victim is trained by their trafficker to watch for those who are drinking excessively or under the influence of a substance, winning or spending a lot of money, and to approach them with certain phrases that would be common in the casino setting as a way to lure them to a more private area. Does the guest defer to another person to speak for them? Patrons 21 and older should be able to speak for themselves in most instances. If they have someone there that speaks for them and they seem afraid to speak for themselves, have surveillance monitor them. Do they appear to be coached on what to say or give responses that seem rehearsed? Especially if there is more than one in the group and they all seem to have the same response that seems rehearsed, this could be an indicator of human trafficking. Does the guest dress inappropriately for their age or in out-of-season clothing? Most people have a perception that sex trafficking victims are forced to dress provocatively. However, traffickers do not want the victims to stand out. They want them to blend in. What you want to look for is if the clothes they are wearing seem off. They are in a warm location and you see them in winter clothes. They may be someone who ran away or fled a situation where they had only the clothes that they were wearing. They may appear to have no control over their money and/or ID. The trafficker will hold on to these items that will make it harder for the victim to flee and also keep the victim from being able to identify themselves if approached by casino staff and asked for an ID. Does the guest reference traveling to other cities or towns frequently? Many traffickers travel across the nation to attend large events where there will be a lot of people from out of town, money, substance abuse, and partying going on. such as sporting events, concerts, or locally, it could be fairs, rodeos, powwows, etc. So you may hear the traffickers or victims talking about a lot of traveling. Does the guest talk about getting paid very little or not at all for the work that they do? The trafficker will keep the majority, if not all, of the money. They will tell the victim that they owe them for the hotel room, transportation to get there, any food or drink they are provided, the clothes they are wearing, or drugs, always keeping the victim dependent on them and unable to get the money they need to become financially independent. Does the guest appear to have no freedom of movement? The trafficker may be a male or female. They may follow them everywhere, and if the trafficker is not a female, they may send other trafficking victims into the bathroom together to track one another and to keep them from trying to ask someone for help. This is why we encourage that human trafficking signs be posted on the inside of the bathroom stalls. This is possibly the only time that they have alone. Now we are going to discuss indicators of human trafficking for food and beverage staff. Indicators of human trafficking food and beverage staff may observe. Some of these indicators may be observed in other gaming departments and roles. Does the guest entertain a minor at the bar or restaurant that he or she did not come in with originally? The buyer of sex might make arrangements to meet the victims away from the casino floor where minors are allowed, such as a bar or a sports bar in the restaurant. Does the guest claim to be an adult, although appearance suggests that he or she is a minor? You may observe a younger person taking an adult role that seems inappropriate for their age, such as setting up dinner reservations or paying for the meals. Again, using your gut instincts that it seems off. Does the guest loiter or solicit patrons or staff? The victim may beg for food or money to eat or meet their money quota set forth by the trafficker. Does the guest wait at a table or bar to be picked up by a patron? The victim doesn't seem to know the patron and may leave with more than one patron throughout their time there. Does the guest take cash or receipts left on the tables? Again, this may be a way for the victim to meet the monetary quota as set by the trafficker. Does the guest attempt to recruit other victims? You may witness male or female victims approaching other patrons at the bar or restaurant and striking up a conversation and inviting them to their room. Listen to your gut instinct. Get surveillance to monitor them. So we have talked about what to watch for, but now let's talk about ways you can safely respond to potential human trafficking activities. Many of these responses I'm about to share were developed with the recommendations of a survivor of sex trafficking. Provide human trafficking training during new employee orientation or onboarding and annual human trafficking training for all employees. Utilize this video, the DHS online toolkit, or other human trafficking resources. Prepare employees for large events and remind employees to watch for human trafficking indicators. Again, utilize this video, the DHS online toolkit, or other human trafficking resources. Make sure your employees feel safe. Security especially may be targeted and/or harassed. Security guards are typically the first to respond to an incident. They may be seen by the buyer of sex or the trafficker and may feel targeted or harassed. If an employee is concerned, offer them a security escort to their car and work with local law enforcement to drive by the employee's home to check on them. Develop employee support programs for those directly affected by human trafficking or MMIP, with tribal gaming often being one of the main employers in the tribal community. Many of those who work at the casino and hotels are from the community. Tribes have high rates of trauma, both historical and current trauma. Develop an employee support program that is culturally infused and confidential. Display throughout the casino and in employee break rooms human trafficking posters that include indicators and the helpline contact information. Again, we recommend placing human trafficking signs with the indicators and the human trafficking tip line on the back of bathroom stalls, as this may be the only time the victim is not being watched and may see indicators and realize that they are being trafficked. The traffickers and buyers of sex convince the victims that if they ever try to escape or go to law enforcement, that they will be arrested for prostitution. So many of the victims have no idea that they are a victim of human trafficking and not a criminal. Develop human trafficking policy and procedures and include it in your emergency preparedness and response plans. The tribe, tribal gaming regulators, and operators need to develop a policy and procedure for human trafficking and include it in the casino emergency preparedness and response plan. Employees need to know who to report an incident or concern to, and supervisors need to know the process on reporting suspicious or criminal activity. Collaborate with your tribe, local law enforcement, and task force organizations addressing human trafficking in your community. Identify and invite the community stakeholders, meet with them regularly, and include them on your response plan. Require all vendors to sign a responsible vendor statement on human trafficking. Let the vendors know that your casino has no tolerance for human trafficking and require them to sign a responsible vendor statement, as well as encourage them to attend your human trafficking trainings if you offer one, or ask them to go to the Truckers Against Trafficking website and get trained. Wear blue across the casino floor on January 11th for Human Trafficking Awareness Day. This shows solidarity and support for human trafficking victims and survivors, and it may strike up a conversation and help spread awareness. Talk to your supervisor about wearing blue on January 11th. Know how to assess the situation and respond appropriately. Our goal is after you receive this training today, you will feel like you can better assess and know how to respond. If you ever feel that you or someone is in immediate danger, dial 911 or call local law enforcement. Designate a safe and quiet room for victims. If the victim is where employees or the public can see them, including the trafficker and/or buyers of sex, they will likely flee out of fear. Be alert to important details: clothing, height, license plates, etc. Try to remember as many details as possible, but never follow the victim or trafficker, or put yourself in harm's way to get pictures. Get surveillance to do that. Select security guards who have a kinder, empathetic approach, good listeners, be at their level. Security guards do not have to be trained specialists. The victims have often been convinced that law enforcement and security and anyone with authority is out to harm them. So if the security guard is standing or pacing, the victim may feel afraid and want to leave. The security guard should sit and be an empathetic and present listener until a trained professional arrives. Establish a point of contact with local law enforcement and victim services that can respond immediately. This is very important, as the window of time that you have from when you have rescued a victim to getting them help is a very narrow window. If the victim has to wait longer than an hour, they will likely become afraid and leave. Make sure you have a point of contact that can get there immediately. Do not attempt to confront a suspected trafficker or alert a victim to your suspicions. Have surveillance monitor, and they can work with security or local law enforcement if there becomes a need to intervene. Follow your organization's reporting protocol. Call 911 or local law enforcement authorities if you or someone is in immediate danger. You can report suspected human trafficking to Homeland Security Investigations tip line at 1-866-347-2423 or submit an HSI tip form online. To obtain victim support, contact the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. Add these contacts to your phone today. Thank you.
Hello, and good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on what part of the globe your screen currently calls home. My name is Christopher Wallace, and I'm a special agent with Homeland Security Investigations, and have been for over 19 years. I'm currently serving as a program manager for forced labor in the supply chain with the Center for Countering Human Trafficking. Now, if the magic of digital video, computers, and the internet has cooperated, you should have just heard about the Center and its work to counter human trafficking from the incredible folks at the Blue Campaign. Today, over the course of the next 3.5 hours, just checking to see if I have your attention, I'm going to speak with you about money laundering and human trafficking. I'll focus on casinos and hotels, but please remember, whether it's a racino, a card club, or frankly, any other gaming establishment, the chances are excellent that criminals are trying to launder money through it. The information I share with you comes from the hard work of HSI agents and analysts working all over the globe. For those of you that aren't familiar, let's start with a little background on Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI. So as you can see, we're big. HSI leads the DHS Center for Countering Human Trafficking. That size and mandate illustrates the importance of HSI's mission to investigate transnational criminal organizations. One of the most important tools we use is following criminal proceeds, or dirty money, as it moves across cities, states, and nations. We have 30 special agent in charge offices across these United States, 235 domestic field offices, somewhere around 6,900 special agents on any given day, depending on who gets hired and who decides to retire. We can be anywhere that you need us to be. We are able to work with you or with local or tribal law enforcement to address this problem as it arises in your place of business. We're in over 50 countries around the world. For HSI, these investigations do not have to stop at the water's edge. We have the ability to work with our foreign law enforcement partners to continue investigations beyond our borders. I'm going to say it once, say it twice in order to hopefully make it a little easier to remember. The information provided to you today is an attempt to compile the tremendous work of HSI employees and HSI's law enforcement partners and task force officers. I consider it a privilege to work alongside these folks every day. Less weekends now than there used to be, if I'm being honest. The folks at the financial crimes and asset forfeiture units are in the weeds every day, reaching out to financial institutions to better understand them and to help HSI and its partners follow the money. For all of the topics mentioned today, entire blocks, and in some instances, days of training exist to get into the details and the nitty-gritty. Please reach out to the center or your local HSI office if you need assistance or would like to delve deeper into any of the topics I'm going to discuss today. The center is a wonderful mix of folks from across the entirety of the Department of Homeland Security, working hard to provide information and assistance to not only HSI, but law enforcement and private and public organizations around the world, all in an effort to combat the evils of human trafficking. As you have heard in the previous block, the purpose of the center is to break down barriers between DHS components and teams, promote collaboration, bring together diverse expertise from across the department, and share promising practices to achieve the mission. One team, one fight, $236 billion, a staggering number to say the least. To quote the report, this is the obscene level of annual profit generated from forced labor in the world today. And as you can see, unfortunately, it is not headed in the right direction. That's why your help is so important. A quick aside on terminology. As we're all aware these days, language is fluid and constantly changing. The International Labor Organization, or ILO, is a component of the United Nations. It includes all victims of human trafficking, including victims of sex trafficking, under the term forced labor. At the center, it's been broken into separate components. There's the sex trafficking unit and the forced labor unit. In the US, forced labor is also referred to as labor trafficking. But simply put, people that are trafficked are subjected to forced labor. In law enforcement trainings on money laundering, you'll likely hear this phrase: placement, layering, and integration. I think we can all agree the main reason we take the time to make money is because we want to spend it. And this is the language that's used to describe that conduct as it moves through financial transactions. Casinos in particular represent an avenue where all three stages are in play, forgive the pun. And when there is also a hotel involved, the possibility to generate criminal revenue through forced labor is now also present. In a perfect world, none of the scenarios or indicators I'm about to discuss would be new to you, just a friendly refresher. The main reason we've put all of this together today is because we need you. I have the white beard, sadly, but fortunately for you, I left the top hat at home. When it comes to the establishment you're working at, you are the expert. Trust your instincts. You are best situated to notice behavior that deviates from the day-to-day routine of hospitality and gaming. And in that spirit, here's our first collaboration. The indicators on the screen are what we typically provide to banks, credit unions, the traditional frontline financial institutions. I left them in this presentation as is, unaltered, so that you can see some of the behaviors that have been frequently observed with this type of crime. How might they apply in your hotel or gaming establishment? I think you'll find a lot of overlap. In fact, I'm certain that some of you are thinking of an instance right now. When it comes to casinos, here are some of the indicators of money laundering. The dirty money may be from trafficking or something else. The schemes associated with these indicators, a lot of you have seen or heard of, such as cash in, cash out, the simplest and most typical method of laundering money at a casino. A criminal simply exchanges their money for chips, plays a bit, and then converts them back into cash and walks out. There's also collusion. Multiple players will pass chips to each other, or in a poker game, for example, deliberately lose in a way that benefits a co-conspirator or player that's in that same game. On the more complex side, there is junket financing. A gambler deposits money in a VIP account in one location and then accesses this credit or account in another jurisdiction where the casino chain has an establishment to gamble or withdraw. Regardless, it's all for the same goal: moving money across municipal, tribal, state, or national boundaries. Now let's come back to some specifics associated with human trafficking. There are a lot of vulnerable populations across the country. Folks that through no fault of their own have been trafficked into forced labor. This is an excellent opportunity to talk about the lived experience experts that work with the Blue Campaign. They have the courage to share their stories about how they were trafficked. It's an excellent opportunity to learn the reality of something that a lot of people are too quick to share uninformed opinions about. I'll share the Blue Campaign website at the end of the presentation. Okay, so now we're in a casino with a hotel, or a hotel with a casino, depending on which side you work in. These are some of the indicators to be on the lookout for. These interactions may involve the passing of cash or chips. They may involve the use of smartphones to access person-to-person payment apps, or they may not. Unfortunately, there really isn't any one bright red flag that you can rely on. Everyday people innocently engage in these behaviors as part of their vacation. That's where you come in, and that's exactly why we're asking for your help. It's your experience in these settings, your familiarity with the everyday versus the, wait, something didn't look right about that. Maybe you should reach out to management, security, law enforcement, whatever your establishment's procedures are. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, was established by the financial wizards of the U.S. Treasury and codified into law by the Patriot Act. For those of you that work in the gaming industry and are responsible for compiling and providing information to FinCEN about the activity in your establishment, thank you. Your work is vital, and it cannot be overstated how important that information is to investigators. And I'll give you an example how shortly. For those of you that work in law enforcement, thank you. The information in FinCEN is vital, and it cannot be overstated how valuable a resource it is when looking at the financial aspect of any criminal investigation. And I'll give you an example how shortly. Once again, for those of you in law enforcement, if you don't have access, FinCEN requires a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, with any law enforcement agency whose personnel will access the FinCEN BSA portal. Typically, the state police will set up an MOU and then establish a point of contact that smaller departments can send requests to. That POC is then responsible to adjudicate the legality and propriety of the request and conduct it, and then respond back to the requester. Again, for law enforcement, please check with your department or agency. I've downloaded that list and will be happy to provide you with the POC in your state for whomever asks. Since this is being broadcast, I won't endorse the book officially, but for those of you that like a little homework, I'll put a great book in the chat or make it available in the forum that describes casinos, human trafficking, real estate, and money laundering as it occurred in British Columbia, Canada. It provides good insights for anyone interested. It does a great job of showing how quickly criminal organizations and money launderers will move in when financial reporting requirements are not being followed. The sums of money were staggering, and it's just another example of how important and vital the work of reporting suspicious transactions are. This is an excellent example of HSI and task force officers working together to target, investigate, and turn over for successful prosecution a group of human traffickers involved in sex trafficking. An initial set of facts that those of you in law enforcement will be familiar with. Women would set up shop at an area hotel, utilize skipthegames.com to advertise and facilitate commercial sex. In this instance, an operator network was sending sex buyers to that hotel. Now, sometimes other groups or individual sex workers would make the mistake of taking up space in the same hotel. Well, when that occurred, a pair of individuals would visit and rob the sex workers they encountered. Unfortunately, not just rob, though. They would inflict traumatic violence on some of these women to defend their turf. So HSI and the task force officers did what law enforcement across these United States do. They put in the time and effort and worked the problem. From the targets they were able to ID from video surveillance, They searched for them and found them in FinCEN. And they found a figurative gold mine. The investigators discovered multiple filings on their targets that showed the purchases of vehicles made with over $10,000 in cash, the purchase of multiple pieces of real estate by layering their criminal proceeds through multiple banks and attorneys via cashier's checks. The investigators believe the group that they targeted is part of a larger organization operating out of a part of the country those of you with experience in this realm can probably guess. And one of the reasons they believe that is because they observed their targets engage in chip walking. They would enter the casino, exchange the cash for chips, and then eventually exit the casino with the majority of those chips. For the local group, investigators tracked over $800,000 in 18 months. The horrors that humans can inflict on each other can unfortunately be very lucrative. The seizures look great when you write them down, but a tremendous amount of work lies behind these few sentences on your screen. It's worth the effort though. If you encounter something like this and need more help, please reach out to law enforcement agencies. I could think of a great one. Please reach out to your local HSI office. For the law enforcement folks participating today, I just want to quickly reference a few other platforms that frequently come up in money laundering and human trafficking investigations. Western Union. There are a lot of money service businesses, money remitters or money transmitters. You've heard of them, used them, encountered them in investigations. MoneyGram, Walmart, Coinstar, etc. But Western Union has an excellent financial intelligence unit. If you've worked with them, you know. If you haven't, and you have a target you know or suspect is using Western Union, consider this my attempt to convince you that it was a lucky break for your investigation. When submitting information to Western Union, if the law enforcement agency confirms the request is part of a human trafficking investigation, Western Union will conduct an investigation and file suspicious activity reports for anything discovered that breaks with typical patterns. Here is their contact information if you don't already have it. I cannot sing their praises enough, and HSI is very lucky to have such a wonderful working relationship with them. I spoke with one of their representatives just the other day on a lead and was asked to especially highlight that if you're working a human trafficking investigation with a nexus to China, then it's absolutely worth your time to reach out and check with Western Union. Peer-to-peer payments. Here's a summary of the major platforms in the United States. The use of Zelle, Venmo, and Cash App for the transfer of money from victims to traffickers has come up often in HSI sex trafficking investigations. Cash certainly isn't going anywhere in this country, but the future can't be stopped either. Zelle and its parent company, Early Warning Service, are a particularly wonderful resource for law enforcement in any financial investigation. Now, you don't have to sit through presentations like this to learn more about financial crimes from HSI. The Financial Crimes Unit sends out a monthly newsletter designed for the financial industry, but available to all. It provides explanations and red flags of the ever-evolving financial industry and the crimes and frauds law enforcement and financial institutions encounter. There was an issue on human trafficking and the DHS Blue campaign in November of last year. In the top right, you'll notice everyone's favorite restaurant innovation, the QR code. It gives you the ability to sign up. Here are some contact options for reaching out to the center. The center's website includes information about the center, as well as the latest annual report. Finally, I'd like to thank you, not just for the honor of sharing your limited, valuable, and always in-demand time today, but for the hard work that you choose to do day after day. You already have a full-time job, and taking this on is greatly appreciated. For law enforcement, this work is hard on you. Please reach out if you have questions or if you need more support for your investigation than you have access to. HSI is great at working with other federal, state, city, tribal, or campus law enforcement. The center was founded on the idea that when we work together across lines, we are more effective and can achieve more. One team, one fight. Thank you, and good luck.